Okay, everybody, happy Friday to you. It is Ryan Catherwood. Thanks for listening to Alumless. I'm your host. Alumless is a Chris Marshall advancement consulting production. On the show, we discuss alumni and donor engagement strategies and other trends in university advancement. Thanks to all of our listeners for making Alumless part of your work routine. And I had a lot of great feedback recently from listeners that have mentioned they enjoy the show, enjoy the podcast. So we're grateful to be building a bit of a community around Alumless and really excited for today's show. Today, we are broadcasting live as we try to be and often get a lively discussion going in the LinkedIn comments. So please, if you're listening to us live, say hello, introduce yourself, and don't hesitate to ask Chris or myself a question. Or even better yet, be sure to ask a question to today's special guests, Karin George and Bonnie Devlin, managing partners and co-owners of Washburn and McGoldrick. And if I can't get to the question during the LinkedIn live show, rest assured we'll try to tackle your questions in the bonus segment, which we record after the LinkedIn live show and publish on the podcast version of Alumless. Okay, so without further ado, let's bring in the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Chris Marshall. How are you today?
You gotta stop saying that stuff. Whatever you do it.
I feel like, what's going on? What's shaking in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania today?
Like most people with younger kids, it's back to school mode, right? We got kids going to school. We had already one homesick. That was a lot of fun. But chasing around with activities, and my wife does the bulk of that. I don't know how she does it, but I've been traveling quite a bit. I've been in Durham at NC State and Duke in Durham and NC State and Raleigh, and then at Gettysburg and University of Delaware. So it's been pretty busy for me on the road in the last 2 weeks, really.
Absolutely. And actually, we had a chance. I always love when we get the chance to catch up in person.
Yeah.
And we did so a couple of weeks ago at the Washburn and McGoldrick team retreat. And I know I had a great time learning and sharing at the retreat, and there were some great discussions. But you've got a special relationship with our guests today, Bonnie and Karin of Washburn and McGoldrick. And I thought it was a good moment as we sort of start the show today to share a bit more about how CMAC and Washburn and McGoldrick are connected.
Yeah. Bonnie and I go back, and I'll tell that story later. But as I was launching CMAC almost 4 years ago now, Bonnie was somebody I went to as special advisor, friend, and mentor, and asked advice and guidance. And Bonnie said something to the effect of, we have a lot of clients who need help on the alumni relations side. And I said, I think I'm going to have clients who are going to need help on the development side. So we have just sort of been partner companies is how we think of each other. We use each other's expertise, connections, networks, and just as someone to run things by and bounce things off of it. And so I feel like a part of that team. And I know you've just been absorbed into that group as well as part of it, having attended that conference. So it's just a good group of people to have. And the other thing is, for a while I was by myself, and you joined a little over a year ago. But with Bonnie and Karin, the team is another dozen people. That makes you feel like you're part of something bigger and broader. And I love that. We meet monthly with that group and get to really interact and, again, leverage each other's expertise and networks. And that helps both companies. It helps us all as individuals, as consultants, learn and grow. And it's just been a great partnership, is how I would describe it. It's been wonderful.
Well, it was a really fun event. And it was actually, I grew up in New England myself, and it was my first time in Northampton, Massachusetts, and on the campus of Smith College, which was really cool. And that's Karin's hometown. And so that was really fun as well to see a part of New England that I hadn't been to before, even having grown up there. Yeah, so, I think that there's so much to talk about today that it makes a lot of sense to go ahead and bring Karin George and Bonnie Devlin into the stream so we can have a lively conversation. All right, we're clicking the button.
With two guests.
What's that?
This is our first time with two guests.
It is our first time with two guests. Bonnie Devlin, Karin Lee George, how are you today? It's great to see you.
Terrific.
Great to see you too.
Terrific to
Bonnie
see you.
Devlin and Karin George are the... I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just beautiful sunny day here in Northampton, Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, it was great when we were up there. Actually, it was funny. The funny part was when the hotel we were meant to stay at It was actually pretty hot when we were there, and the air conditioning broke, right? So you and your team sort of scrambled and
overnight changed venues. Right?
Overnight. That was our classic, alumni relations scramble there, right? Trying to make sure your event went off out of it. Nobody noticed the difference, right? Which was great. But Bonnie Devlin and Karin George are the managing partners and co-owners of Washburn and McGoldrick, LLC. Washburn and McGoldrick is a consulting practice with experts that help colleges, universities, and independent schools successfully seek philanthropic support and create lasting relationships. So founded in 1995 by Sue Washburn and Bill McGoldrick, and co-owned since 2014 by Bonnie and Karin, the team at Washburn focuses on campaign planning and execution, advancement officer training, program assessment, strategic planning, gift planning, alumni engagement, external relations, institutional leadership, trusteeship, and governance. They do it all, ladies and gentlemen, which is just the easiest thing to say. But it's great to have you both on the show. And I thought I'd start off by asking you each the same question, maybe starting with Bonnie and then with Karin. There's so much to talk about, of course. And we had a chance to connect it together, and I got to learn a little bit more about what makes you tick. But about working as advancement professionals, why did you want to own your own consulting practice, and what gives you the most sort of joy about what you do and the space that we work in?
Well, thank you, Ryan. And first of all, thank you to you and Chris for inviting us to be your guests. We've been looking forward to this, and it's great to have a chance to reflect, to take a little bit time out of the active practice and think about what's led us here and where we're headed. For me, I had the great privilege and opportunity early in my career, which I spent mostly at the University of Pennsylvania and then at Lehigh University. I'll get to that in a minute. But I worked with some really fine consultants. I had the chance to work with one of the founding members of Martin Lundy, Burr Gibson, and with Ned Lees early on during Penn's first billion-dollar campaign. Then I also worked with Carol O'Brien, Chris, a longtime consultant to Duke, among other clients, and always enjoyed that work and learned a lot from them about the ability to step back and look at a program and provide assessment and guidance. And I loved that. When I went to Lehigh, I first became a client of Washburn and McGoldrick, and neither Bill nor Sue were my consultant. Was my consultant. My consultant was Peter Buchanan. And some people remember just this wonderful man, Peter, who was the vice president at Wellesley, the vice president at Columbia University, and also he's a former president of CASE, our professional organization. And each of them encouraged me. They saw something in me that I didn't even know was there. They thought I would be a good consultant, and they encouraged me to consider that. So when I had the opportunity, Bill and Sue listened to Peter and said, why don't you come join us? And I think what I've loved about it is the chance to, I'm a child of two teachers, and fundamentally we do a lot of teaching, training, and coaching. And I really enjoy that part of the work. It's a bit of a little bit of counseling too, in that line between counseling and coaching. And I think both Karin and I were surprised how much of that there is in the work. But that's what I love.
Awesome. Karin, what about you?
I'll echo and amplify and agree with my dear business partner there, Bonnie said, but let me first start also by adding my thanks. Thanks, Ryan and Chris, for having us on. It's been in ink in the calendar or in virtual ink for a while, and definitely looking forward to this conversation and enjoying it already. So in addition to what Bonnie said, I mean, I also feel incredibly fortunate and grateful. One of my first vice presidents was Sue Washburn. And so the connection to Washburn and McGoldrick and the connection to the impact of this work, whether on campus or now as a consultant, is woven through pretty much my entire career. I've been with Washburn and McGoldrick now for almost 18 years, which seems impossible to me. And through all of that, I think a consistent theme, why I love this work, why I love now being part of the ownership of it, is that it's collaborative. You're never on and Chris, you said this in the introduction, there's a collaborative energy to that. Collaboration with our clients, where we're problem solving together. While we may be looked at as the experts, and we definitely look through the lens of experience, we work to really draw out the best that we find in every single one of our clients. I also love in this work, whether from an ownership perspective or the active hands-on work, I love the diversity of our clients. Some of the goals they have might be shared. You might even argue that they're universal and they've not changed dramatically over the course of this profession. But their unique cultures and the energy that each of the teams bring to the work, I love. And while I loved being a campus officer, we get such a wide range of that now in this work. And it keeps us young, maybe, or at least I like to believe it keeps us young, and keeps us energized. And we're all about sort of that common purpose of trying to affect change. So I love that. The ownership part of it, I mean, my goodness, the opportunity to work for mentors, both on a campus and then in a consulting firm, and be tapped by them to take up the mantle of their incredible leadership. There are days, I think, when Bonnie and I still can't believe that it sort of rolled out that way. We're grateful, we appreciate it, and we've got the opportunity to put our own imprint on a company that was a going concern and created by two amazing leaders who are still very active in this industry. So there's a gratitude aspect to this all around.
That's fantastic. And I really got the sense of the things that you and Bonnie have been mentioning when I was able to join you last month. Really a great work family environment. But Karin, when we were talking about what we wanted to focus on today, we sort of landed on the idea of campaign readiness as the topic. As you work with partners in the early stages of preparation for a campaign, what are a few of the questions that you always like to ask, and how does engagement fit into those set of questions? A lot of our listeners sort of come from the engagement side of the advancement shop.
Absolutely. So let's start there, actually. Let's start with engagement, because I'd contend it's sort of the broad umbrella under which we're working. Yes, it's absolutely true. And we're thinking about campaign readiness that will often be asked to focus on the dollars. That's critically important. But we can't get to those ambitious goals that even that sense of readiness without understanding how our audiences interact and get involved and engage with us, engage with our messaging, engage with our priorities, engage with and when I say I really mean the campus leadership. What I worry about, and I know you didn't ask me about worries, but it sort of it helps me think about the questions I ask and assess, and that we assess readiness. I worry that campuses and organizations can be fairly inwardly focused, and they'll have great plans and ideas about their priorities, and then decide, all right, let's share these with our donors, our volunteers, our audiences. And sometimes they're almost so fully baked, and it will sound to those we hope to engage, oh, our great ideas, your money, your time. So if we are truly going to earn the right to ask for somebody's time, which is incredibly precious, as we know, Chris was just referencing what it's like with kids in school and activities. We are all that precious commodity of time we don't get more of in a day. So when I think about campaign readiness, especially when we're speaking with CEOs, I want to ensure that the questions that I ask have to do with, are you truly ready to bring in your audience and listen carefully to their advice and opinions? Are you willing and flexible to incorporate their ideas and opinions and sense of where they are in your plan going forward? Because if you're so rigid and that your plan is the exact right one, you may not be ready actually for the response and ready then to fund those ideas, to involve those ideas. Are you ready to talk about and define engagement? I mean, you know this better perhaps than anyone. It's the space you're working in, you and Chris. We talk a lot about having an engagement goal, for example, in a campaign that might line up side by side with that big dollar goal. But then when we ask questions about, all right, well, how do you define that? What does that mean? How are you going to add excitement to that and really achieve that? How do you define success for that? Sometimes there's the blank stare that comes back. So that doesn't mean you can't move forward. In fact, that just gives us great opportunity to really dig in and think about how we define this clearly, how people can achieve those goals clearly, and how they can think of the many different ways in which they bring their stakeholders and audience members closer. So they will invest time and significant dollars, or all their, not necessarily always significant, but their dollars in the endeavors ahead.
Bonnie, what do you think? Same question. What questions do you like to ask, and how do you think about engagement?
Well, I'm going to talk about two different pieces of that. So one of the big questions, and it relates to Karin, what Karin was saying about the impact. You have to have a strategic direction for the college or university or independent school. And if you don't have that, it's very hard then to make the case for whatever it is you want to raise money for, or wherever you want your alumni to support you on. Too many times, and we're hearing it in feasibility studies. I think we've done now 65 feasibility studies over the life of the firm, and we do several every year. Karin and I have each finished doing some very recently. And people think about the questions for a case, why this institution, why now? But the real question we learned came in many ways from another one of our partner firms, Stiggy Thompson, where Pat LaPera, the president emerita, will say, "So what? So what's So what? Why should people care?" And I don't think that our institutions, in examining their navels, sometimes get to that particular that issue. And that really does start with the leadership. That's the president, that's the provost, that is in many ways the board. What do they want? So we start many times with that question, and getting that question right often takes, if you can get that right, a lot of the other pieces then will fall into place. I think from engagement, on the engagement point of view, I think too many times, and unfortunately, this week's latest release from U.S. News and World Report just reinforces this. Alumni engagement for too long has been defined by annual giving participation. And it's so much more than that, as you well know, preaching to the converted here. But that whole idea of, why? What's the value proposition? And too many times, just like Karin said, people say, here, we're doing all these great things, give us money. I think the same is true. Come, we're going to throw these events, and we're going to write these publications, and here, you have them, you receive them. When the real value is when it's when the value proposition is there for both. What do each party benefit? How do each party benefit from it?
Yeah. Chris, you've just been hired by an advancement VP in the run-up to a campaign. What questions, as an incoming engagement strategist consultant, are you asking?
Yeah, let me just share something I learned with Bonnie and Karin, and I've been added to a few projects where they're working on a pretty broad, what ultimately wants to become a feasibility study to launch a campaign. But what Bonnie and Karin in the firm Washburn McGoldrick does is they do a campaign readiness assessment just prior, not always, but mostly. And what I've been so impressed by is that there's a pretty clear path to determine whether or not someone's ready. And what's most impressive, Bonnie and Karin have gone back to clients and said, "You're not ready." And here's what needs to happen between now and then. And that is a strong message. When I almost thought it was like a perfunctory thing. You just move right into a feasibility study, but in many cases, they're not ready. And my questions on the alumni side are very basic. And are they ready to even think about this? Do we have the systems in place? Are we willing to track the alumni engagement? Do we have the business processes in addition to the systems, where to put it, how to get it in there? But the big one is, do they have the institutional will to do so? And that starts with the vice president. I know we're going to talk a little bit about how vice presidents feel about this, but the ones that I think are doing the best job are the ones that fully understand the integration of the advancement operation includes an engagement. Yeah. Of course, they understand that, but that their alumni program is going to play a role, not in shaping the next campaigns down the road, but in helping this one. And so do you have the systems? Do you have the business processes? Do we have the institutional will to be able to track these things? Are the first things I look at from a readiness standpoint on the engagement side.
Yeah. Karin, maybe we can just take a step back for a second and talk about the economic outlook when it comes to philanthropic giving and some of the more macro factors. What does the big picture look like for schools when it comes to engagement?
Oh gosh, great question. And there's a lot packed into that, Ryan, but the big outlook at now, while I'd love to say that the crystal ball is indeed crystal clear at Washburn McGoldrick, we're always paying attention to sort of external factors as well as the internal factors, and the external factors related to the economy and some of the other major sort of factors definitely play a role in a campaign readiness, as well as sort of the back to what Chris just said, the will of the institution, the will of the vice president. So I'm hedging here, right? Because I'm not, the outlook on a day like this. I am back, by the way.
The classic consultant, and just it depends.
It depends. It always depends, right? It always depends.
Right.
And that's right. That's a good answer. And indeed, I'm back to, I don't get a paper version anymore of my retirement account statements, but I'm back to not opening the emails.
Right. No one look.
Figured, because it's a long game. So that's a way of, so I'll, get into your answer that way, that, clearly the immediate needs of our clients are really important and we want to pay attention to that. But those immediate needs also set up that longer term, especially when we come to a campaign. Campaigns are about the long game. And because this is a relationship-based business at its core, we want to make sure that we are tending to those relationships well, and thinking very carefully about how we craft and retain those new relationships over that period of time. So we are going to go through periods that are going to hurt more. So we think about the economic outlook and how that overlays with the philanthropic outlook. We tend to see over time, and this is driven by data. If we're looking at Giving USA data and long-term philanthropic data, we'll see the immediate response in philanthropy tend to track Standard & Poor's, tend to track some of those ups and downs, but not typically as dramatically, actually. So all of that to say that people continue to engage and spend their time. In fact, they will spend more time with those organizations they care about because they know those organizations are also feeling that pinch. People understand that connection and correlation. When it comes to giving, the philanthropic engagement, we're often finding, and we hear this from the feasibility study interviewees of just this past summer, the economy has started to come back up in conversations, and yet it has more to do with maybe reducing the number of charitable organizations they support, but not taking the ones they care about most off their list. So that's a long way of saying, when we see the storm clouds on the horizon, and there are lots of them, I know that right now, it's not just economic outlook. We're talking about an increasingly polarized society, not just here in the United States, but globally. Does anybody even listen to anybody else? And that's a core top skill in this work, is listening with discipline and true willingness to understand what somebody's saying. So while it makes institutions nervous, we have not yet to this point, and I'm hopeful that Bonnie will nod her head, we've not yet to this point told an institution they aren't ready purely because of the economic outlook.
Right. That is.
Right.
Chris, in your estimation, have most advancement VPs sort of changed their tune on engagement?
Yes. I can stop there and let Bonnie spend the rest of the time on her answer, but I'll share with this. Here's my indicator. I spent 9 years consulting in this field, and for the beginning of it, almost all the clients were the associate vice president or equivalent for alumni engagement. Whereas today, it's the opposite. The vice presidents for advancements are hiring CMAC and Washburn McGoldrick on the alumni engagement side to help them think about a more integrated strategy. So to me, that's a signal, a clear market signal that says this is on their mind. How do they take that asset that they have and leveraging those resources in a way that's going to help them now and in the future raise more money? At the end of the day, we have to raise money to fuel the machine that is these large institutions. Engagement is critically important, and I believe building relationships with people and involving them, and all those things are important. But how do we measure all this? At the end of the day, it's going to come down to, do we have the fuel to run the engine? And more VPs, I believe, are seeing the importance of a strong, functioning alumni engagement operation that are going to be a part of that overall running that engine. So yes, it's back to my short answer. Let Bonnie take any more on that time. So,
well, just to follow up, Bonnie, when alumni aren't engaged with their schools as, alumni or donors, what are some of the most likely reasons why, and how should advancement leaders, presidents, superintendents be thinking about the importance of this special group and their needs and how to earn their philanthropic support?
Well, Ryan, as you know, we've been doing a number of surveys for our clients, alumni surveys, and often in partnership with CMAC. And we now have a body of data that suggests that, frankly, the reasons for not being engaged are very similar to the reasons for not giving. And one of the top of the list, which is really interesting to me, is people will say, we live too far away. So proximity equals engagement in many people's minds. But if you unpack that a little bit further, it turns out to be that another organization, they actually feel closer to it. And I don't mean just geographically, but local organizations have more impact in terms of if they get involved in serving that organization as a volunteer or in giving to it. So so they feel closer to it, or they just don't feel as though the impact of their service or their gift to alma mater is going to be as significant. There's a small minority who basically who just won't give and won't volunteer. They've moved on. And it's probably as high as somewhere between 15 and 20% of every alumni population. Chris, would you say? I mean, you've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen up to a third, and we're just not going to get them.
It's just not going to get them. But the others often, and then there's the classic way that happens. We see this in fundraising. We teach this in give training. It's simply that nobody asked. Nobody asked. Right. Nobody made it easy to be a volunteer. And that means not just asking someone to be on a board. That seems, unfortunately, often to be the first thing to think of. Oh, well, let's put so-and-so on the board, or let's make a committee. But in today's world, with younger alums, with women, with people of color, that's not necessarily, and I would say for pretty much everyone, that's not the place to start, really everybody. But I think in particular, we see this in some of the groups that I mentioned. Women will say, hey, I've got a lot on my plate. I can't take that on. But do you say, would you come to campus and speak to students about your experience in the work world, or your experience running a nonprofit, or whatever it is? The one-off opportunities are great first-time engagement opportunities, and people will say yes to that, and they gradually, then you build on that and take it, get people much closer. When we go to the extreme, when people have made extraordinary gifts to the institution, it's not by chance. They've been involved in non-fundraising activities. So their advice has been asked. They've been involved deeply with students, with faculty, with coaches, with staff members and student affairs, whatever it is. In addition to their good colleagues in advancement, they've had those opportunities. It's been tracked. Some really interesting work on principal gift donors making the largest gifts. They've been around for a long time in most cases, and they've been deeply involved in the life of the institution.
Yeah, the anatomy of $1 million gift is something like 10 years or more of active engagement when you look at that. And I think that's a really amazing and important statistic. Chris, it's hard to believe, but we're approaching the top of the hour. These
live sessions go quick, and it went quicker.
Go by super fast. We were warning Karin and Bonnie about the speed of lightning by which these shows go. But before we hop off and record our bonus section, Chris, who are we going to be featuring on our next show?
They're all fun for different reasons, but from Carnegie Mellon University, the Associate Vice President for Alumni Engagement, Teresa Trombetta, will be our guest from Carnegie Mellon. We're looking forward to that one.
Great.
Yeah, that'll be great. We'll have Teresa on in 2 weeks' time, same fancy place here on LinkedIn. And for those of you who are podcast listeners, I talked to someone the other day who's like, thank you for making the podcast edition, because they listen on the way to work. So I thought that was a pretty cool piece of feedback. But thank you so much for everyone for listening live or for watching this in the days and weeks to come on LinkedIn. And we'll see you on the podcast. And Chris, Karin, and Bonnie, we'll see you on Zoom in just a minute.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.